Time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. Joining us, Jason Burt, Chief Football Correspondent at The Telegraph, and the Mirror's Chief Football Writer, John Cross. Welcome to you both. Let's run you through those back pages. The back page of The Guardian has an interview with Mark Cavendish as he retires from cycling. At the top, they cover Bournemouth's draw with West Ham, and at the bottom, there's more on Marcus Rashford at Manchester United, with the forward facing what they call a cut-price exit. The Sun claims Rashford must be prepared to suffer to stay at United. They also report the club is looking into whether any of their players might be responsible for leaking details of their team lineup. At the top, they talk about Trent Alexander-Arnold's contract talks with Liverpool and claim there's a difference of £170,000 per week between the current offer and what the player wants. Jason has a piece in The Telegraph looking at the future of Pep Guardiola, saying he's unsackable, and Guardiola himself will be the man to decide when enough is enough for him at Manchester City. Lots on the back page of The Eye. It's all changed at Everton as the takeover approaches completion. They say they have to wait for new players once the Freaking Group takes control. They also look at what led to Russell Martin being sacked by Southampton. But we will start with the future of Manchester United forward Marcus Rashford. Both he and Alejandro Garnacho are left out of Sunday's victory against Manchester City in the derby at the Etihad. But a piece from Jamie Jackson in The Guardian says Marcus Rashford has been marginalised and put up for sale by Manchester United as part of a cultural reboot, and says Ruben Amorim has decided the 27-year-old needs to leave in order to engineer a shift in culture throughout the club. So, Jason, he said afterwards yesterday, Ruben Amorim, that a new week is a new life for players who were left out, but it seems that Marcus Rashford's time at Manchester United could be coming to an end sooner rather than later.
Yeah, that does seem the case. I think if Manchester United are using phrases like cultural reboot again, I think their fans will be dropping their cocoa tonight, to be honest with you, because I'm not quite sure they want to hear that phrase ever again. It was one that we heard before with Ed Woodward. But certainly Marcus Rashford's future is in sharp focus. I mean, last week we did a story in The Telegraph saying that he was for sale, and that seems to have accelerated over the last few days with him being left out of the squad for the Manchester derby, and obviously Ruben Amorim explaining why that was the case, and clearly he needs to try and fit in if he is going to have a future at the club. That's looking highly unlikely at the moment. The big question then, though, of course, is what kind of buyer they can find for him, whether they can get a deal done that somebody takes him off their hands. The fee will be a cut price fee for sure, partly because the wages are so high. So anyone who wants to buy Marcus Rashford is going to take a big financial burden onto them. In saying all of that, he's an academy product, so although the fee will be lower if he is sold, that will be banked as pure profit. So it will feel like more money in a sense because of the PSR rules. But certainly at the moment, it does look like if he wants to stay at Manchester United, he very much is fighting for his future. It's hard to see him fitting in with the way that Ruben Amorim wants to play. His probably best route into the team at the moment is probably as an understudy to Rasmus Højlund, and you can't carry on like that, especially with the salary he's on. So it's going to be a big decision in the next few weeks and months, maybe even in January, if they can get the right deal done. I don't see that quite happening. I think it'll probably be next summer, but certainly it looks like his career is coming to an end at Man United.
John, Jason rightly mentions the salary there a couple of times, which Jamie Jackson in The Guardian is saying is around £365,000 a week, which you would think narrows incredibly the number of clubs that could afford him, unless we have a scenario where Manchester United continue to pay his wages after he's left, just to get rid of him.
Yeah, look, I'd be so surprised if we had a development in January, to be honest. I just feel if you are going to do something in the winter window, it's really got to be kind of cut price. It's got to be tailored to that market. And I do think United would end up having to take such a hit that it would be a remarkable departure for Rashford. I personally think Rashford probably does need a fresh start. He probably does need a new set of surroundings, to be honest. He's always so proud, isn't he? And I do think this is the point, really, that it's that connection with United fans, that he is that academy graduate. He loves the club. He's got such a connection with the club. But look, I do think he's lost his way at United. I mean, even when Amorim came in, people were writing newspaper columns about, him being away sort of for a quick break in New York before just before the new manager came in to start training. It's not the greatest look. He's not done anything wrong in that, but does he really, really want to kind of knuckle down and impress the new manager? And that's the point. I think Amorim sort of kind of quickly came in, tried to sort of kind of carrot with a stick, and basically said, look, I see this guy as a part of my plans, but he's really got to want to, to really earn it, and sort of kind of challenging Rashford to kind of knuckle down and sort of do, get his career back on track. That really hasn't worked. I mean, look, me and Jason were both at the Etihad yesterday, both really surprised, I'm sure, to see him sort of left out the squad entirely. And that really is saying something from a new manager. That's a statement from the new manager, in my view, to leave a player like Rashford out of the Manchester derby. He knows what that means to Marcus Rashford. He knows what sort of interest that will create. And Ruben Amorim, who I have to say has massively impressed me so far, both as manager, tactician, and then also, I think, spokesman. I think he speaks so well. He spoke with, real clarity after the game yesterday. He really took on board what supporters would want to hear about, sort of showing pride, not just in the shirt, but in the club, reminding people that, staff and employees have lost their job through redundancies, and what that means to a club like United, who absolutely pride themselves on their history, tradition and community, and just reinforcing that message, I thought, to not just Rashford, but Garnacho as well, and basically making that clear. And he really, really impressed me there. But the warning was clear. And I just think for Rashford, he's got to pick up on this. Look, being the cynic, that I am, perhaps, I think the last good spell of form that Rashford had was almost post-World Cup, wasn't it? Playing for a new contract. He got that contract. Has he delivered really since he got that contract? He's a brilliant, brilliant player. He's got huge potential. And at the moment, he's not showing it at Old Trafford, I have to say.
And that is part of it, Jason. And it was interesting, Michael Richards on Super Sunday yesterday saying that he feels that sometimes Marcus Rashford is perhaps unfairly the fall guy at Manchester United, and that whenever something's going wrong, let's all point the finger at Marcus. But as John said, 2 seasons ago, he showed he could do it at 30 goals in the season. That's one reason why your form will be picked up on. Another reason is the wages. If you're one of the highest paid player at a club like Manchester United, it'll be picked up on. And then if you do things like January, where he goes to Belfast and doesn't report to training, again, you're going to be the focus of a lot of criticism, particularly when things aren't going well for the team and the club.
Yeah, they're very, very fair points to make. I think in the past, Michael Richards' point probably did hold true. I think he was perhaps regarded differently from some players, partly because he was the great young thing coming through at Manchester United, and there was an awful lot of hope and expectation on his shoulders during a difficult time for the club. He's gone beyond that point now. He's one of the senior professionals, really, at the club, and certainly one of the highest paid one. People will say, well, it's not about money. Well, unfortunately, it does come down to that to a degree, because clubs have to justify salaries and players have to justify salaries. And if you're not earning the money you're being paid, then obviously that's going to be scrutinised and people are going to look at you in terms of your contribution. And unfortunately, I think also that his dip in form, or his loss of form, or his failure to reproduce the form he's shown in the past has gone on for quite a long time now. And if you are giving apparent reasons for people to question your form, question your behaviour, you've got your own manager now questioning whether or not you're conducting yourself in the right manner around the club to be part of the team, as Ruben Amorim did yesterday, then yes, it's a legitimate debate as to whether or not he should be moving on, or whether or not he is justifying the status he has at Manchester United. And it may just come down to the bare fact that sometimes players need to find a fresh environment. And he's been there all his career. He holds a lot of responsibility at Manchester United. He sometimes looks like he's got the world on his shoulder because of that responsibility. And maybe he himself needs a fresh start to take him away into a different environment, to kickstart his career and to give him a new place to play and a new place to finish the next part of his career. And I think that might be what it's heading towards. In saying all of that, that may require a compromise from him, which again, we don't often see, where he might have to turn around and say to United, well, I'll take a deal that maybe I have to take a lesser salary. Now, I mean, it's a bit naive of me to say that, but I don't see that happening, obviously. But it may come down to that. If he really wants to be the player he can be again, it probably isn't going to happen for him at Manchester United. As I say, I struggle to see really where he fits into this system under Ruben Amorim. And the way that it's going with Ruben Amorim at the moment, it doesn't see that he thinks there's a chance of Rashford being a regular starter for him either.
John, just to come back to Ruben Amorim and his early impressions, there's a couple of stories. The Telegraph and The Sun both feature this bid to see who's leaking the Manchester United team for games. But on a wider point, and also to include dropping Garnacho and Rashford yesterday, it seems as though Manchester United fans are prepared to swallow maybe losing the odd match, almost on a point of principle that Garnacho or Rashford could have made a difference yesterday. Had they lost, it would have been easy to say, well, if those two were there, you wouldn't have. But he's doing something long-term, which I think Manchester United fans are prepared to buy into.
Yeah, absolutely. He wants to set a tone, basically, doesn't he? And that's what so impressed me, really. I just thought, if he feels he brought up really the issue about behaviour, about standards, about, even dress and what they eat, which you immediately think, what have they done really to kind of, earn his wrath, if you like, really. But I think that the United fans have really already liked what they've seen from the new manager. He's lost a few games, but he's also won games. He shows a sort of kind of a determination to put things right during games. He is obviously a smart tactician. They're a lot harder to beat, even in the games that they've lost. They've really put up a fight and basically shown, real commitment and desire within those things. I like the way that he just seems to have this connection with the fans. And I think when you have that connection, the fans immediately relate to what they're seeing, and the fans will basically buy into and indulge a manager when he makes bold calls like that, because they see it for the long term. Listen, I'm convinced that Garnacho comes back and has a big future under Amorim. I have to say, I really like him. I think he's an exciting player. For Rashford, I do think he needs a fresh start. But I tell you what, Ahmad, I mean, he was the star of the show, wasn't he? And it's just him that I think it sort of almost epitomises the new manager bounce, if you like. There's a player that seized an opportunity. We all knew that he was a good player, and he's shown it in patches before, but he's really unlocking that potential, determined to impress the new manager. I still think United need a big rebuild. I still think they need lots of new players. But I tell you what, the United fans have already seen what they like, what they've seen from Amorim, and that's why they'll indulge the manager on big calls like this.
OK, still a bit to think about for Manchester United despite that victory at the Etihad on Sunday. Lots to think about for their neighbours across town. The champions in trouble, struggling for form. We will talk about the issues facing Pep Guardiola and Manchester City, in just a few minutes' time. Welcome back to Back Pages. Tonight, Jason Burt, the chief football correspondent at The Telegraph, and the Mirror's chief football writer, John Cross, are with us this Monday evening. And Jason has been writing about the Manchester City manager, Pep Guardiola, and his future. That terrible run of form continues. As Jason say, unsackable Pep Guardiola will decide when it is the right time to walk away from Manchester City. But he looks an increasingly frazzled figure, Jason, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. And this developed from a question that was legitimately asked this morning. Basically, when do you reach a point when even somebody like Pep Guardiola is in danger of being sacked? And I see that, I think the Mirror have done, that he's now raced up the odds of the next manager to go. So maybe something is afoot. But I think my understanding of the situation, having spoken to a few people and looked at it, is really he's in a position where he is unsackable, which is hardly rocket science. It's hardly a great revelation. But I think he's earned the right, in the way that Jurgen Klopp did, to dictate his own future. And I think the fact that he signed this new 2-year contract, obviously his intention is to stay. His intention is to undertake a huge rebuild at Manchester City, which I think they realised should have started last summer. But there was lots of reasons why they didn't do it then. I think partly because they wanted to give it one more year. They wanted to see what Pep wanted to do. Cheeky Bergerstein was going to go, a new sporting director was coming in, and all of that. They were just trying to hold on for one more year. They've realised that was a mistake. Pep was initially going to sign a new 12-month contract. He signed a new 2-year deal to show basically his faith, and also that he thinks that it will help, provide more stability around the club. However, nobody expected this run of form. So it does reach a point where you're starting to think this has to start to change, this has to turn around. And I think one of the key things that will happen is they'll be much more active in January than we expected. I think that will be an indicator of where Pep is at. In saying all of that, his body language isn't great. Sometimes he's almost talking himself out of a job. He talked about not being good enough yesterday. And the point I make is, could any other manager in the Premier League have said that yesterday without there being a huge outcry of, even within the club, what does he mean? How can he possibly say he's not good enough? But Pep's earned that right. So to cut a long story short, I think he does dictate his own future. He will decide one day and speak to Khaldun Al-Mubarak, the chairman, that's it, he's finished. It could happen anytime in the next 2.5 years or even the next 5 years. But I think it will be definitely his decision. I can't see him ever being sacked by Manchester City.
Do you think, though, John, and Jason makes a lot of comparisons between Pep Guardiola and Jurgen Klopp in his piece, and understandably so, but Jurgen Klopp obviously came out just after the midway point of last season and said, end of the season, I'm done. Could you ever see a scenario where almost on the spot he says, I'm finished now? If this run was to continue into the new year, would he just say enough is enough?
Well, look, I must say, Jason knows how much I like him and respect him as a journalist, and I completely agree with his piece. I think he's absolutely nailed it there, because he has to dictate. It has to be on Pep's terms. I personally think he's veering on for being the best manager we've ever seen in the Premier League era. I think the way that he's developed football and developed Manchester City, the way that he's created this winning machine is sensational. Put the boot in there, the Mirror headline that we're seeing there is sort of, I think he's up for second favourite now, isn't he? And in the Premier League sack race. Well, look, could I see him walking? When I look at him yesterday at close quarter, I was in the press conference room after the game, and he looks a broken man. His team look finished. They look absolutely cooked. And basically, they look exhausted. They look completely done. This generation is done. Gundogan's too slow. De Bruyne, what a player he's been. He's been one of the Premier League all-time greats. But he's come to. I mean, you almost feel pity for him. De Bruyne is an absolute City and Premier League legend, and now he's struggling to get about the pitch. It's really, they've left it too long. Kyle Walker, making his podcast, you'll never beat Kyle Walker. Frankly, at the moment, everyone beats Kyle Walker. And it's, everything's going wrong, really, for City. And, Walker's such a good player. I think he's, recently been playing with an injury. That shows you how determined he is, but also how short City are. So you kind of, you've got to balance things up, really. But they do need a rebuild. I still think that on the one hand, it wouldn't shock me, if I'm honest, that Guardiola suddenly thought, do you know what, enough is enough. I've done my absolute best, which he has, by the way. 4 in a row has exhausted him, I think. And thanks very much. See you later. But there's no way in the world, I think, that City sack him. But could I see him doing a Klopp, if you like? At the moment, I probably could. I don't think he will, though. I think he'll see it out. I really hope he does, because I do think this guy's a genius.
And part of the reason I could see it, Jason, is whilst the comparisons are obvious between him and Klopp, Jurgen Klopp knew fallow times. He was relegated at Mainz. He had big dips at Dortmund. He'd had a dip or two previously at Liverpool. Whereas Pep Guardiola knows nothing but success. He is in the most uncharted of waters at the moment. And maybe that is leading into why he looks so lost, because he doesn't know anything other than incredible success.
No, that's undoubtedly true. I would agree with that. The counter argument to that is surely then that should make him all the more determined to stay, because if he did leave, if he did cut and run effectively, then he would be opened up to all sorts of criticism that, he could only really thrive as a manager, or he could only really be successful as a manager when he had all these resources and it was all working for him. He needs to be in a situation perhaps where things aren't so great and things aren't, all going in his favour, and he is in the middle of a slump, and he does have to change the team, and he does have to rebuild. Obviously, he did a rebuild at Barcelona when he first went in, but that rebuild involved moving on players like Ibrahimovic and having players like Messi coming through who are already in the academy. At Manchester City, it's going to be a much more wholesale transfer window-driven rebuild of players who need to move on, who've gone to the well so many times with him and for him, and can't do it anymore. And the question is, can he still go to the well? He's already said this is going to be his last club. So that in itself has put a sort of a finite, end to things, because he won't manage another football club. He might manage a country. He probably will manage a country. So this period will help define how he's regarded as a manager. He's clearly one of the greatest managers ever. We know that. But if he does leave, which I don't think he will, but if he does leave earlier than we expect, then people will criticise him for that, and he'll open himself up to a lot of criticism. I think to a degree he won't worry about that too much, because he's quite an open character in many ways, and he does wear his heart on his sleeve. He does say what he thinks, but I think also he needs to think about how that could play in terms of his own reputation, and how that would also play around how that would leave City. But so I think all those factors are going to contribute. But I think he will stay. I think he will see through this rebuild. He'll get through this bump. He will re-energise himself and go again. But I think January will be interesting. I think they need to do a couple of big signings in January just to sort of stabilise things and get back on track.
Let's just race through a couple of other football stories, if we can. In the Sun, John, Liverpool £100,000 short on persuading Trent Alexander-Arnold to sign a new deal, writes Ken Lawrence. Currently on £180,000, Liverpool prepared to go to £250, but Trent wanting £350. Of the three that are out of contracts with Salah and Van Dijk, the other two, does Trent Alexander-Arnold look the most likely to leave to you?
Yeah, he does. I do think that Van Dijk, surely that will be a given. I do think Mo Salah, it's just about sort of making the right offer, the right time, if you like, and also, Liverpool kind of covering the backs, making sure that they don't sign him on for too long. But Trent, I just feel as if, I bet if Liverpool, and I think they will win the title this season, if Liverpool win the title and Trent Alexander-Arnold leaves on a free to explore something new at Real Madrid, I don't think any Liverpool fan will hold it against him. And why wouldn't he? And I think this isn't so much about money, it's about a new adventure. So I do think, yes, they could make him an incredible offer. But my hunch, I don't know, maybe veering towards him joining Real Madrid on a free in the summer.
Just finally, Jason, there's some images of the Monday Night Football as well on the back pages. Some with Lucas Paquetá's celebration with Julian Lopetegui. Denied an important victory with that late Enis Unal free kick for Bournemouth. And the West Ham head coach seems to be the next in the firing line. That victory against Wolves last Monday hasn't done huge amounts, you would say, to alleviate the pressure long term.
I think no, not long term. I think in the short term it definitely has. I think not losing the short tonight is big for them. Bournemouth is a difficult place to go and achieve some really big results against some big teams. And I think the manner of the game as well, the way they played, obviously under a lot of pressure, I think it will buy him more time. If you're asking me whether he'll be the manager of West Ham at the end of the season, my hunch is he won't be. But he will see through this period and probably around Christmas and New Year going into the January window. But I would say it's definitely one to carry on watching and keep a watching brief on. And I don't think he's definitely out of the woods yet.
OK, gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Jason, Burt and John Cross with us this Monday evening. Good to have you with us, chaps. And if you missed any of the show, a quick reminder that you can see back pages at hour right throughout the course of the night. The show's also available as a podcast. All you need to do is download back pages on Apple, Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. It is back again, same time on Tuesday as well. Our guests will be Miguel Delaney and Martin Hardy.